So this is your Solving Equations review video number 3. So if you're working on your Chapter 1 review, you are getting close to being finished. This section of the review is over multi-step equations with variables on both sides. So notice these are different than the first two videos. Video 1 was over one-step equations. Video 2 was over multi-step equations, but variables were only on one side. And now we're looking at variables on both sides. So when you're dealing with variables on both sides of the equation, it's a little bit different because remember, if you remember back to our notes, we have to make sure that we're moving all our variables to one side using inverse operations, and then we're moving all our numbers to the other in order to isolate the variable. So if you look at problem 26 here, we have 24 minus 8x equals 4x. So notice on this problem, our minus 8x is on the left and our positive 4x is on the right. We want to move all our x's to one side. So to move across the equal sign, we have to do the opposite. So I'm going to add 8x to both sides. Whenever I do that, positive and negative 8x will cancel, and I'll bring down my 24. And that's going to equal 4x plus 8x, which is 12x. Then from here, the opposite of multiplying by 12 is dividing by 12. So I'm going to divide both sides by 12. 12 divided by 12 will leave me 1x. And 24 divided by 12 is 2. And that will be my answer. Remember, you can always plug in and check your answer by putting 2 where x is. So 24 minus 8 times 2 is 16. So if you did 24 minus 16, you would get 8. And if I put a 2 right there, 4 times 2 is 8. So they both equal 8, so I know I did my problem correct. Okay, why don't you pause the video and see if you can do number 27 because it's just like 26. Remember, you want to move your h's to one side of the equation using inverse operations, your numbers to the other side of the equation using inverse operations, and then isolate the variable. Alright, so for this problem, the first thing that I did is I chose to move my positive 3h to the other side by subtracting. So 3h minus 3h canceled, and 7h minus 3h was 4h. Since I moved my variables to the left, I knew this constant, this negative 12, had to be moved to the right. So the opposite of minus is plus, so I added 12 to both sides, and 24 plus 12 is 36. So the next thing I was left with was 4h equals 36. To get h by itself, I have to do the opposite, and the opposite of multiplying was to divide. 4 divided by 4 leaves me with 1h, and 36 divided by 4 is 9. So the answer to number 27, h, would be equal to 9 in this case. Okay? Alright, so let's look at number 28. So number 28 is similar to 27. Notice here I have r's on opposite sides of the equation, and then I have my constants. So the first thing you need to decide is, are you going to move the negative 8r to the left or the positive 8r to the right? I prefer to move the negative 8r. So the opposite of subtracting 8r would be to add 8r. So I'm going to add 8r to both sides. Positive and negative 8r will cancel, and 8r plus 8r is 16r. Since I moved my variables to the left, that means this positive 30 has to move to the other side. The opposite of positive is subtracting 30. Positive and negative 30 cancel, and negative 2 and negative 30 make negative 32. Since I still need to get r by itself, the opposite of multiplying by 16 is to divide both sides by 16. 16 divided by 16 leaves me 1r, and negative 32 divided by 16 is negative 2, which would be my answer for r. Okay, why don't you pause and see if you can do 29, and then you can check your work with mine. Okay, so on this problem, I chose to move the negative 2w to the other side, so the opposite of that was to add. So negative and positive 2w cancel, and 9w plus 2w is 11w. Since my w's were on this side, I needed to get rid of that negative 4. So I added 4 to both sides. Those would cancel, and 7 plus 4 is 11. The opposite of multiplying w by 11 would be to divide. So 11 divided by 11 left me with 1w, and 11 divided by 11 on the left gave me 1. So I know that w is equal to 1. So if you notice on this second part of this video, like 30 and 31, these equations are getting longer. So I'm having to do more cleanup before I can start moving things around. So if you look at the equation for number 30, notice that I have a 5h and a 3h on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to start by combining like terms. So I'm going to rewrite my equation. I have h minus 1, which I've done nothing to because it's already as condensed as it can be on the left. And then that equals, well, 5h plus 3h is 8h. And then I still have minus 8. Okay, so now these look like what we were working on the last slide. So from this point, we just use our inverse operations. So the opposite of positive h is subtracting h. So I'm going to do that from both sides. These will cancel, and 8h minus h is 7h. Now notice, since I have my h's on the right, I know that I need to get rid of that negative 8. So the opposite of negative 8 is positive 8, and I'm going to add 8 over here. Negative 1 plus 8 is 7. Then the opposite of multiplying by 7 is dividing by 7. So I find out that h has to be equal to 1, which is my answer. Okay? Alright, I am going to help you with 31 as far as getting it cleaned up on both sides of the equal sign, and then I'm going to have you finish out solving. So when I look at 31, I notice that this 8k and this minus 3k are on the same side of the equal sign. So I know I need to combine those. So if I have 8k's minus 3k's, I'm left with 5k's. And I still have a minus 14. Then that's going to equal, and if you look at the right side of your equation, you have 7k's plus k on the same side of the equal sign. Well, 7k plus k is 8k. And then I still have my plus 4, okay? So now it's just a two-step equation, just like I had earlier. So I want you to pause the video and solve that, and then check your work with mine. Okay, so after we combined our like terms, because they were on the same side of the equal sign, I did that on both sides, that's when I started moving stuff around. So when you move across the equal sign is when you use your inverse operations. And remember, inverse just means opposite. So the opposite of 5k was minus 5k. Those canceled, and 8k minus 5k was 3k. Since my k's wound up on the right, I had to get rid of this positive 4. The opposite would be to subtract 4. Those cancel. Negative 14 minus 4 is negative 18. Then the opposite of multiplying by 3 was to divide. 3 divided by 3 left me with 1k. And negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. Alright, let's talk about distribution. So you know you have to distribute if you see parentheses with a number right outside. Now notice on number 32 there's actually distribution on the left and there's distribution on the right. So I'm going to take care of that now. Remember, distributing just means you're multiplying. So 2 times 4g is 8g. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Equals, and then I have to do the same thing on the other side. So 3 times g is 3g, and 3 times 6 is positive 18. Once again, we've got an equation with variables on both sides. So I want you to pause and see if you can solve it on your own, and then check your work with mine. Alright, so hopefully you were able to solve that. So notice I start the same way every time. So once my equation is cleaned up, so this one I had to distribute first to get this red equation, I'm moving all my g's to one side by doing the opposite. The opposite of positive 3g was to subtract 3g. Those cancel. 8g minus 3g is 5g. Since my g's wound up on the left, I had to move the minus 2. So I added 2 to both sides. 18 plus 2 is 20. The opposite of multiplying by 5 was to divide. When you divide 5 by 5, you get 1g, and 20 divided by 5 is 4. Alright, so we've been working with fractions now for almost 3 weeks, so hopefully you're getting a little more comfortable, but let's look at number 33 just in case. I'll help you distribute, and then you guys can pause and solve. So 1/3 times 6t. Remember, you do 1 times 6 is 6. Divided by 3 is 2t. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the 1/3 and the 12. 1 times 12 is 12. Divided by 3 is plus 4. Okay? Alright, then on the other side, a negative 3 times 2t is minus 6t. And a negative 3 times a negative 4 becomes plus 12. Alright, pause and solve and then check your work with mine. Okay, so on this one, I chose to move my negative 6t to the other side by adding. Then I subtracted 4 from both sides. And then I divided by 8, and I got 1. Now, some of you may have moved the 2t to the other side and your 12 to this side, but it doesn't matter. You should still get 1 because it's the same equation. You just solved it the opposite way than me. You moved your variables to the other side. Okay, so we've done several examples now of multi-step equations with variables on both sides. So I'd like you to try 34 and 35 from start to finish on your own, and then start the video and check your work with mine. Okay, so for number 34, the first thing that I had to do was distribute this negative 3. So negative 3 times 2y was negative 6y. Negative 3 times negative 5 became positive 15. Then negative 7 times y became negative 7y, and negative 7 times negative 2 became positive 14. Then I moved my negative 7y to the other side by adding, and I moved my positive 15 to the other side by subtracting. And it worked out nice and neat for me because then I got y equals negative 1. Now if you moved your variables the opposite way, you had negative y equals positive 1. And hopefully you remembered to divide by a negative so that you also got the final answer, which was y equals negative 1. Okay, 35 actually had a couple of extra steps. So notice this positive 3 right outside these parentheses, it needs to be distributed. So don't forget that this x is still part of your equation. Then 3 times x was 3x, 3 times 1 was 3. On the right side, it was just normal distribution. So negative 3 times x was negative 3x, negative 3 times negative 8 was positive 24. Now when you went to solve, hopefully you noticed that you had an x plus 3x on the same side of the equal sign. That's why I combined them and got 4x plus 3 equals negative 3x plus 24. Then you do all your solving the same way we have been, and you get that x is equal to 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a word problem. So in this word problem, we're comparing two gyms. We're comparing gym A, which they tell us that gym A charges a $50 membership fee and $20 per month. So if I was writing an equation for gym A, I know that I have to pay $50 plus $20 for every month. And I'm using X for the number of months. Then they tell me that we have gym B, which charges a $10 membership fee, but $30 per month. So a $10 membership fee, and then plus the $30 per month. Oh, I just noticed I did not write 20, I wrote 2 over here, so let me fix that. $20 per month. There we go. Okay, so then it says we want to know after how many months is the total cost the same? Well, same means equal. So I set gym A's fees equal to gym B's fees, and then I solve. So I'm going to pause here, and you guys go ahead and solve, and then check your work with mine. Okay, so in this problem, I chose to do the opposite of positive 20, which was negative 20x. 30 minus 20x is 10x. Since my x's wound up on the right, I had to get rid of this 10 by subtracting. 50 minus 10 was 40. And then the opposite of multiplying by 10 was to divide, and 40 divided by 10 gave me 4. So that means that in 4 months, the gyms would cost the same. Okay. Hopefully you guys are getting close to being finished with your review. If you need some extra help, don't forget I do have tutorials, and I will see you next week.